In the Democratic town hall discussion of climate change, Senator Elizabeth Warren was asked about something called the AKE Act. For many viewers, this was the first time they had heard of this bill. So to find out more about it now, we are turning to progressive broadcaster and activist Bob Kincaid. Bob is with the Head On Radio Network. He's an activist with Coal River Mountain Watch, and he's a co-founder of that group's Appalachian Community Health Emergency, or ACHE, ACHE campaign, and he is very familiar with this topic. So, first of all, Bob, welcome to the Zero Hour.
Well, thank you very kindly, Richard. I really appreciate it, especially the opportunity to talk about the ACHE Act. The more people can learn about this, the better off we'll be, because for far too long, mountaintop removal, massive surface mining in Appalachia has been our dirty little secret.
So, and I know it's horrifying. I've seen it. I know a little bit about it. But tell us, mountaintop removal is devastating to the environment. Doesn't leave much behind, but in the way of a life, among other things, for the people who live there. Tell us what the ACHE Act would do.
Well, first of all, in order to understand, we're talking about surface mine sites that can be thousands of acres. And what they do is they blow up they tear out, cut down all the trees. They shear away all the life. They set fire to that and burn it. Then they blast. And when they blast, they're blasting down sometimes 800, 1,000 feet to get at a seam of coal that may be, 6 inches, 9 inches thick. It's dirty, but it's quick, and it makes a lot of money for the coal companies, and it provides very few jobs. Well, the central element to what I just described is the blasting. During the heyday of mountaintop removal, we were experiencing blasting using something on the order of 5 million pounds of ammonium nitrate fuel oil explosives per day in the area of West Virginia where mountaintop removal is practiced. That's not even counting Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, the other states where it happens. When those blasts go off, they create microparticulates of the rock strata that they're being detonated in. And these tiny grains of silica, sand, because it's sandstone that overtops the coal. These tiny grains of silica are 1/100th the diameter of a human hair. And there is nothing in the human body, we have found out through rigorous scientific research, there's nothing in the human body that can filter or stop these particulates. So they get down and they operate on a subcellular level, and they cause cancer, heart disease, birth defects. For instance, a woman who is expecting a baby, if she lives near mountaintop removal, but she does not smoke, and we know how bad smoking is for an expectant mother and for the baby. If she lives near mountaintop removal, but she doesn't smoke, she's got a 128% greater chance of giving birth to a baby with respiratory birth defects than a woman who does smoke, but doesn't live near mountaintop removal. And so with all of this, and there's nearly 30 peer-reviewed journal articles out there that describe these public health impacts. We, it goes as far back as 2011, 2010, people have known that people were getting sick. But starting in 2012, we drafted a bill which we named the Appalachian Communities Health Emergency Act. And it was introduced in the Congress in 2012. It has been introduced in every succeeding Congress. And finally, we have a House that's willing to listen in this Congress. And so the bill has begun to move, and the bill has begun to get traction. It's H.R. 2050 in this Congress, and we're eagerly hoping that it will make it out of committee, perhaps even before the end of the year. We need a lot of public pressure in order to make that happen.
So what would the bill do? It would ban the use of explosives and this mountaintop removal technique?
Well, what it would do is it actually operates quite elegantly. It it commands the Department of Health and Human Services to perform a detailed, granular, epidemiological level study of the health impacts of mountaintop removal. And at the end of that, and during that period of time, there's a moratorium placed on expansion of existing permits or any new permits. The old permits continue to work. People don't lose their jobs. The practice has to continue because, well, it's our understanding you can't just take the permit away from someone. So during the time that the study is undertaken, the sites continue to work. At the end of the study, based on its conclusions, the AIC Act says that the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Resources has to certify whether this extraction method can be safely done around human populations. And if the answer to that question is no, then it is forever banned.
So a couple questions about it. First of all, you mentioned it's been introduced in Congress before. Sounds like it's getting more support as well as more attention this time around. We have a different Congress now that might be more sympathetic to it. Does it have any Republican support, or is it strictly a Democratic bill at this point?
At this point in time, it's strictly Democratic support, although we do continue to reach out to some members of the House who are said to have a strain of moderation to them in the Republican Party, although I have to confess they're as rare as hen's teeth.
Yeah, no, I was going to wonder if there are any of those still around. And again, we're talking with broadcaster and activist Bob Kincaid about the AIC Act. Now, one of the things we always hear about in Appalachia is that people are persuaded not to back, whether it's environmentally sound bills or other restrictions on the mining industry because of the jobs. You mentioned that this type of procedure, this type of mining doesn't produce that many jobs. Are local folks in Appalachia, to the extent that they know about it, the AIC Act, are they sympathetic to it? Are they indifferent to it? Are they a lot of opposition to it? What's the kind of political feeling around there about it?
Well, Richard, several years ago, there was polling done in this state by both a Republican firm and a Democratic firm. And they found a majority, in both instances, a majority of West Virginians would like to see an end to mountaintop removal and these massive surface mine operations. So that's one way of answering your question. The other is to say that it's possible that more people are waking up to the realities of the coal industry, because the companies that did this and have done this for so long, it's the Massey Energy became a coal mining behemoth on mountaintop removal. And then, of course, they went bankrupt. And when they went bankrupt, they screwed their workers. They destroyed their health care, their pensions. And then they marched into bankruptcy court, as these corporations can. And as, for instance, we're seeing with Black Jewel, they said, Judge, we need to take all this money over here, and we need to give it to our executives as retention bonuses and just kick our workers on down the road. And so while a lot of people that, a decent number, maybe 15,000 or so, worked in the industry, that number has dwindled considerably, but it's far from over, because it takes very few people to do mountaintop removal. You can take a crew of 10 guys and some heavy equipment, some D9 Caterpillars and drills and whatnot, and take down 5,000 acres in 5 years. And it sort of depends on who you're talking to. There are a lot of people in West Virginia who would dearly love to see this come to an end, but by the same token, the dead enders, the people who think that we have to have coal to be able to be a functioning state, well, they're still where they were, but so many of them have been done dirty by the coal industry that those attitudes are changing.
Yeah, and we covered the Black Jewel story here. We had one of the miners on talking about what had been done to them, the declaration of bankruptcy, and then leaving them not paid for their last few weeks of work, even again as they were getting ready to take $1 million worth of coal and ship it out and
Right.
sell it. So we know a little something about that. We know a little something about how the mining companies operate. And I would venture to say that anybody who lives in the area, that maybe only a few people work, as you say, at these jobs, because it doesn't take that many people to plant explosives and blow stuff up compared to other forms of work, even other forms of mining. But I would venture to say that an awful lot of people drive by these things every day, see them, see what they leave behind environmentally. Now, you mentioned this particulate matter, that the body has no resistance to, this very fine, small particulate matter. How long does that linger in the atmosphere after a mountaintop removal operation is done?
There have been some studies done that where air monitoring was performed. And so, for instance, we know the traditional miners' holiday is in August. And we see when we saw in the monitoring that was done by, among other groups, the U.S. Geological Survey, when they shut down the sites for the vacation period, it cleared up pretty quickly. But the problem is, once they start up, it goes. We can't even be sure how far it goes, because we're talking about winds above these mountain sites that were measured and shown to be of the speed you would have for industrial scale wind turbines. Now, once they blow up the mountain, you can't put a wind turbine there because it's down out of the range. But when you send these blasts up into those kinds of wind speeds, and considering the tininess of these particles, they go a long way. And what we say around here is what you can't see can kill you.
Right.
Because it has. Realistically, for instance, Richard, you remember after Hurricane Maria, when we found out through academic study that there were 2,975 statistical excess deaths that had not been counted that were a result of that hurricane?
I do remember, yeah.
Well, the same methodology was used in southern West Virginia. And so what we have found out is that in West Virginia's counties that have mountaintop removal, we have a little more than 1,000 statistical excess deaths every year. And those are people who they had no reason to feel like they were sick. But the fact of the matter is, it is as common to find out that someone in the sacrifice zone has contracted cancer as it is to find out that they've caught the cold. And that's and it truly is a one of the most underreported public health crises in the United States today. Because
what about?
I was gonna say, yeah,
go ahead, Bob. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was simply going to say that when we were talking about the particulates, the reason they are so pernicious is because these tiny grains of, and if you look at it under a microscope, it looks like a little tiny piece of jagged glass, and it behaves in your system the same way. It just wreaks havoc. It tears hell out of everything. And so they're small enough. They transit the blood-brain barrier. They transit the heart-lung barrier. And most importantly, they transit the placental barrier. So it may enter through the lungs, but it goes all over. And anywhere it goes, it causes harm.
And then what about the people working at these places? The total employment number is relatively low, but how well are they protected from the health effects of the work they're doing?
Well, one of the more interesting aspects of working on this bill in the last year in particular is the fact that there has been scientific research done, and we're finding out that on these mine sites, and particularly with these surface mine workers, their numbers for black lung and what's called coal workers pneumoconiosis and silicosis have skyrocketed in the last few years. And it's not just black lung, it's the particularly virulent form that kills ugly and kills quick. And so the United Mine Workers a few months ago demanded changes to the regulatory scheme to better protect people working on these sites. And I'm all for that. Let's be clear. But the fact of the matter is, they also the United Mine Workers have said nothing, precisely zero, about the harm that these operations do to innocent people who simply have to live nearby.
And the end result, though, and one of the reasons why I asked that question, end result is in the end, nobody really benefits except the mine owners. And
Right.
and so before I let you go, Bob Kincaid, where can people go to find out more about the AIC Act and maybe get some information to let their representative know how they feel about it?
Well, there's a website, aicact.org, ACHEACT.org. There's also Coal River Mountain Watch's website, crmw.net. There are Facebook groups for both the AIC Act and for Coal River Mountain Watch. Simply searching it will disclose that. I tweet about it quite a lot. I'm at Bob Kincaid on Twitter, and those are some of your better resources. And I can only implore your good progressive audience to please take note of this bill, and please contact your member of the House and tell them to get on board and co-sponsor it, because the more co-sponsors we have, the better the likelihood the bill has of passing. And just as a sidelight, Richard, there's an added, I guess, a value added benefit to this bill, and that is the fact that if we can end mountaintop removal, that is still a whole lot of coal that we're going to keep in the ground. And so the AIC Act becomes, simply by its operation relative to human health, a very potent piece of climate change legislation. In fact, one of the few actual pieces of meaningful carbon, not carbon neutral, but carbon
reducing.
Yeah, reducing. That's the word. Pieces of legislation that can get through the House.
Well, all right. Thank you for that information. And Bob Kincaid, thanks for your great work, both broadcasting and in pushing this bill to help the people and the land of Appalachia. And thanks for coming on the program.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Richard. Thank you so kindly for having me. I'll come back anytime.
That would be our pleasure.